give you some interesting tidbits about the Navy and also illustrate how joint these operations were in many ways. But before that, I'd like to also mention the Navy supports in a very silent way. We call it a silent service. So we have, to the best of my mind, as I see in this audience, two Navy officers whom I'd like to acknowledge. One of them, Commodore Ranjit Rai sir, please, I would request you to stand up. He took part in the war. He is one of those who took part in the war. And more importantly, Commodore Rai has written a book on the Navy in war. His first book was called The Nation and Navy at War. He's brought succeeding versions of that. So he's made seminal contribution to our understanding of the Navy in war. So that's Commodore Ranjit Rai. I'm also honored by the presence of Commodore Anil Jaisingh, a submariner. He was not in the war, but submarines were an important part of the war, and he's a distinguished submariner. So thank you very much for being here. So what is it that I want to talk about the Navy, which is interesting and which is probably not there? One of the things is the fact that, I mean, we could talk Karachi, but I don't want to talk Karachi. That's included. That's caught the imagination of people. So let's see if we can do something away from Karachi. And I'll bring that down in 2 or 3 operations. I don't know how many of you are aware of something called Operation X. Now, Operation X was a special forces operation launched by the Indian Navy. Indian Navy's divers trained the marine wing of the Mukti Bahini. Okay? There was a water wing of Mukti Bahini. They were trained. They were mostly trained in a place called Palashi or Plasi, which has an important point in Indian history. They were trained in Palashi and they went across and they carried out subversive operations deep inside East Pakistan. The first of those operations began on 15th of August. So you want to set your calendar about when did operations start in Bangladesh or East Pakistan, have a relook on that. Most importantly, more than 1 lakh tons of shipping was destroyed by these people who were trained by the Navy's divers. Remember, Navy didn't still have a commando force then, right? So more than 1 lakh tons, which is fantastic. After World War II, that's the maximum tonnage of an opponent destroyed in that country. So East Pakistan was getting to be crippled anyway by the time war started. And this is very important. Not many people know about Operation X. Operation X subsequently ended with something called Force Alpha, when small boats of the Indian Navy went deep inside into Khulna, Mongla and up the Pusur River to help our army give some gunfire support. Now, why was it called Force Alpha? It was an ode to General Arora by the Navy, called Force Alpha. The man who was in charge of that was Captain Mohan Narayan Samant, then Commander Mohan Narayan Samant. He got a Mahavir Chakra because he led this force up the river Pusur. Mohan Narayan Samant had a daughter. Guess what was her name? Meghna. So that's tri-services. That's tri-services cooperation for you. Mohan Narayan Rao. Do you know who wrote the Mahavir Chakra citation for Mohan Narayan Rao Samant? General Jacob. Not the Navy. It was the army that wrote the citation for. And General Jacob in his own book, and we all know that General Jacob is miserly in praise. Okay? General Jacob in his own book writes that the water wing of the Mukti Bahini caused far more damage than the Mukti Bahini did. These are his words, not mine. So these are some very interesting operations undertaken by the Navy that not many people know about, and they bring out tri-services cooperation in beautiful ways. A couple of other quick mentions. We have the Battle of Boyra. Now, the Boyra is very important, not just for its significance. It's produced some stellar cast of characters. There's a future General Panag there. There's a future Air Force Chief of the Pakistan, who was Air Force Chief during Kargil War. Now, you will be surprised, but the Indian Navy was present in the Battle of Boyra too, and in a very, very interesting way. One of these special forces guys, not the special forces guys, divers, a gentleman called Chiman Singh has gone deep inside East Pakistan because he's just told by his fellow, Sir, aa jao hamare saath. He goes, he's a vegetarian, he finds it difficult to live in those houses, eat at night. He pretends that he's a guest from UK in support of the Bangladeshis. He lives on just moongfali every night, okay? They go causing huge amount of destruction, in East Pakistan. Then he is on his way back having accomplished his mission. And he runs into Boyra just when the Battle of Boyra has started. So Chiman Singh, of course, he is captured by the army. They refuse to recognize him till he sees his gaonwala and says, "Main tumhare bhai ko janta hu." And they do some cross questioning and say, yes, this guy was given for missing in action. Chiman Singh subsequently is again on the riverine raid. Chiman Singh is a Mahavir Chakra. So the Battle of Boyra produced lots of Veer Chakras, but the only Mahavir Chakra was one who witnessed it from the naval side, and that's Chiman Singh. So you got some very, very interesting tidbits here. We talk of General Sagat, a great person. The Navy had legendary Admiral Krishnan. And if General Sagat was the greatest sort of combat general of the Indian Army, Krishnan was many ways like that. Krishnan is a DSC of World War II. He outgunned in a gun battle an Iranian ship captain. Okay? So that somewhat little plump person that you see in the surrender photograph, don't go by that look. He was a fantastically brilliant person. Okay? So where is Krishnan? Krishnan is there in Junagadh, liaising with the army when Operation Peace happens. Krishnan is there in 61, liberation of Diu. He's told to stay 10 miles away, give distant support. He says, like hell, I'll give distant support. And he blasts the Diu fort with the 6-inch guns of Delhi. So there's combat experience. Just as General Sagat, does Goa first, then goes to Nathula. So by the time Krishnan ends in 71, he's the CNC East. He's the one who lures Ghazi to its doom. He's the one who decides to employ the aircraft carrier in offensive operations in the East with the backing of the Navy chief, of course. So there are these great, what I'm trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the Navy produced, sometimes war produces this alchemy where you have this great cast of characters. So the Navy had a fantastic cast of characters. Admiral Nanda at top, General Krishnan in East, Swaraj Prakash, the missile boat commanding officers, great guys who did lots of fantastic deeds. We don't know too much about them. I'll end with what can be described as somewhat delightful and somewhat poignant strategic consequences of the 71 war. One, of course, the mention has been made of Khukri. So I must mention about Khukri in a bit because Captain Malla's sacrifice was great. The second mention was made of the Enterprise incident. Okay, I'm not going to talk about what happened. Obviously, Enterprise couldn't interfere by the time the surrender happened. But please remember, if we're seeing the long lee of war today, 50 plus years later, it was the Enterprise incident that forced India to think about what would be its strategic deterrence against bigger powers. That while we might take on powers in our neighborhood, what happens if we are forced to coercive action by bigger powers, and how it has led to force development over the subsequent years within the Army, within the Air Force, and indeed within the Navy. I'll leave you guessing, or we can discuss that during question answers. But it was the Enterprise incident that forced India to think about strategic deterrence in long term. The next point is about Khukri. Two very quick lessons. One, Captain Mahendranath Malla going down. Illustrated, this is a young Navy. We don't often face direct battle. But when he went down with his men, he showed to a young Navy within and to the outside world that this is what tradition is all about. As someone said, it takes 30 years to build a ship, but 300 years to build a tradition. For a young Navy to start this tradition that you never leave your own, I think Captain Malla, what he did. We produced 8 or 9 Mahavir Chakras in the war, but Captain Mahendranath Malla's great thing, of course, sacrifice there. But let's look at one of the more salutary aspects of Khukri. When we lost Khukri and Khukri sank, we realized that one of the problems was the sonar, which the detection, this was a foreign ship. The sonar was not made for Indian waters. So Indian Navy started its indigenization journey. It had begun much earlier, but we said we must build an Indian sonar. Now the man who built the Indian sonar up subsequently was a great guy called Commodore Arogyaswamy Paulraj. Arogyaswamy Paulraj is a in ex-NDA. He's an electrical branch officer, but I'll just tell you, these are the beautiful consequences. Arogyaswamy Paulraj journey designing the sonar for Indian Navy made him subsequently become one of the greatest scientists of the world. Today, if all of you are using mobile phones, it is because of 4G, 5G. The heart of 4G, 5G is something called MIMO, multiple input, multiple output. Guess who is the inventor of MIMO? It's Commodore Arogyaswamy Paulraj of the Indian Navy. So these are some of the great consequences of war.